This is the Emmy Award-winning 11 News Close-Up with your host, Marvin Scott.
Voters gave President Obama a decisive victory Tuesday for a second term in the White House, where he now faces urgent economic challenges, a looming fiscal showdown, and a still divided Congress capable of blocking his every move. Though he did receive 303 electoral votes to Mitt Romney's 206, the president's victory was far narrower than his historic victory over John McCain 4 years ago. Romney's defeat left the Republicans in disarray after failing to unseat Obama and failing to regain control of the U.S. Senate, an outcome many conservatives had predicted. So what does the outcome of the election bode for this country over the next 4 years? Joining us with analysis, we're pleased to have with us Democratic strategist Bernard Whitman, president and CEO of Whitman Strategies. He's the author of 52 Reasons to Vote for Obama. Obviously, people did read it. Dr. Herb London is a senior fellow at the Manhattan Institute. Dr. London was a Republican candidate for mayor back in 1989 and a conservative candidate for governor in 1990. Good to have you with us for a few moments to look back at this historic moment. He didn't win a mandate, but are you surprised the outcome wasn't as close as some had predicted it would be?
Well, if you want me to start, let me suggest that I was surprised. Very, very surprised. I thought that Romney was going to win this based on economic considerations. The unemployment rate, the joblessness, the sense that young people in the United States would not be able to obtain jobs when they graduate from college. However, the one thing that I overlooked was the likability factor. I think that Obama had a clear edge there. And this is going to require a good deal of soul searching within the Republican Party. That is, what does the likability factor mean for the rising tide of immigrants in the United States, of Hispanics in America, and of course the African Americans who voted in very large numbers as well?
I would have to say I was cautiously optimistic all along that the president would win, and that was largely because the difference in the two campaigns was quite dramatic. The president was offering a vision to all of the American people, black, white, brown, Asian, gay, straight, men, women. The Romney campaign was clearly running a campaign that was popular among a shrinking segment of the American electorate, that is, straight white men. And in fact, the president won decisively among Latinos, for example, 71 to 27. He won overwhelmingly, not surprisingly, among blacks, 93 to 22. He had a huge advantage among women, and his gap among men was much smaller than his advantage was among women. So I think what it says is that the Republican Party's game plan succeeded for the small segment of the electorate that he was playing for.
Well, he seemed to, he failed to convince voters that because of his business acumen that he was best for this country in a time of economic recovery.
Well, the pundits have said for time and again that the economy's stupid. And I think that's wrong-headed. What this election demonstrates is that it's the culture stupid, and that the culture has shifted in America, and that if you're going to run for office, there are conditions that have changed in the way in which you conduct a campaign, reaching out to a variety of people. Look, it was interesting that while I regard this as somewhat a somewhat tragic event, the cultural royalty in America include Beyonce and Jay-Z. It's ridiculous, but it was unquestionably effective for a sizable portion of the population. Bruce Springsteen gets on the campaign trail playing songs for Obama. Well, Bruce Springsteen, in my judgment, is a hypocrite, spends millions of dollars on his daughter's horses while he talks about the plight of the working poor. Come on. So I think that what you have to understand is that the cultural shift in America is profound and important. And Republicans, I think, are going to have to take notice of it.
Well, part of the problem, wasn't it, that the Republicans in the first place, they didn't want Romney as their candidate, a moderate from Massachusetts, and that was a problem all along throughout the primaries.
Well, you do find that there were a lot of conservatives that did not vote in this campaign, roughly 3 million, that did not play an active role in this campaign. Whether that would have made a difference in the Electoral College remains to be seen.
Well, I'd have to disagree with my friend Herb, because actually the election was about the economy, it wasn't about culture, and it wasn't about likability. This was a clear and dramatic distinction between two different visions of an economy. And the majority of the American people endorsed a vision that the president shares, which is shared responsibility, shared contribution, and shared benefit, versus a vision of the economy that basically dates from the 1980s, which is trickle-down economics, give money to those at the top, and hope that they, in their largesse, would have enough crumbs to fall down to power the rest of the economy for the vast majority of people. And that was simply rejected by the vast majority of this country.
Look, trickle-down government doesn't work, and it did not work for Obama in the last 4 years. The fact of the matter is there is no president, no incumbent that has ever been elected with an employment rate of roughly 8%. Obama is the first to find himself in that category. If you look at any of the economic indicators, and even look to the polls that dealt with the whole question of, do you feel that Romney is better equipped to deal with economic questions than the president? The answer overwhelmingly was that Romney was better prepared to do so. Yet that was not reflected in the vote. So there's something else that's at work here. It's not simply the economy.
I'll tell you exactly what was at work, because this election was not about the past, it was about the future. And the voters looked and said, which man do they trust to provide economic stewardship that would improve their lot and their lot of their family for the future? And they made a decision that the president's vision and the president's notion of, again, shared responsibility, shared contribution, and fairness across the tax structure was one that would most likely benefit their family.
Well, you mentioned the word future. Let's look towards the future. Will this victory for Obama embolden his dealings with the Republicans? Will they be more receptive, or is it going to be continuation of this divisiveness?
Well, here's why I'm actually cautiously optimistic again. Because, number one, it's been an endorsement of the president's policy, so absolutely is going to embolden him in dealing with the tax code, dealing with the deficit, dealing with immigration, a host of other matters, entitlements, and so forth. But the Republicans also now have a reason to compromise, because their strategy of blocking and waiting for his defeat obviously didn't work. They've got several years until the midterms and 4 more years until the general election. So I think they're going to say, you know what? Let's figure out how to work together, produce some results for the American people, and then take it to the voters and claim that they helped. I think Obama now is going to play for his legacy, so he's got a reason to actually get something done. So I'm actually optimistic that we're going to be able to seriously tackle some of these challenges facing the country over the next 4 years.
I think there is a possibility for some kind of compromise. Keep in mind, however, that the president did not get a clear mandate. The Republicans understand that full well. When they sit down at the bargaining table, there's an awful lot they'll be looking to. When you talk about the fiscal cliff, it is a combination of budget cuts as well as tax increases. The Republicans are going to have to give on the tax increases, but want something in return on the budget cuts.
Now, Vice President Biden said that this did deliver a mandate, at least, on moving closer to the administration's views on tax policy. Do you see it that way, Bernard?
Well,
I don't think
I mean, there's
do.
no question. The vast majority of the American people, 2/3, have from the beginning of this campaign endorsed 2 ideas. Number one, the wealthy should pay more. And number two, the way to tackle the budget deficit is a combination of revenue increases and cutting spending. So the intransigence on the Republicans simply can't stand.
Look, one of the things that you have to understand, there's a kind of bromide that's used in all of this. Have the rich pay more. 1% of the population pays 40% of the taxes. What do you mean by fairness? How much should this 1% pay? At what point do you say they're not going to be productive citizens? Another one of the considerations is even if they paid 50%, and that was the rate that the 1% paid, it still wouldn't have an effect at all on the total deficit that we are facing in the nation. So it's kind of absurd to talk about this. The argument that has to be made is that what do we look at in the way of a reasonable tax policy? Not simply saying the rich are going to pay more. That's one of those silly ideas, a chestnut that's continually pulled out during the course of campaigns. The realistic option is, what is a sensible tax policy for the country? Is it raising the rates from 35% maximum to 37%? Maybe. But all I'm suggesting is I think the Republicans are willing to compromise on that matter if, in fact, there is some retrenchment that takes place in a lot of the areas where you see extraordinary government expenditure.
So you're calling for the give and take we haven't seen in the last 4 years.
Well, you haven't. But I think that, again, and here I agree with my colleague, I think that you will see, because of the Obama victory, I almost made that mistake, because of the Obama victory, I think you're likely to see the Republicans giving on some of these matters.
So they're accepting the lessons of their defeat.
I think so. Again, it's very hard to say because, as I indicated before, one, you can't give too much. The Republicans want something in return. There is a quid pro quo here. And the other part that I think is so important is that the Republicans realize that if they give too much, they're going to sacrifice their base. So it's a question of what they get in return.
Marvin, one other point that I want to make before we have to wrap up is something else extraordinary happened in this election that we haven't gotten to yet. And that is not only an endorsement of the president's vision for shared contribution, but this notion of equality and equality for all peoples. We had 4 ballot initiatives in 4 different states on the issue of the freedom to marry. And each and every time previously that was up for a vote, 32 times out of 32 it failed. This time, it won 4 out of 4. We have a majority in this country that has endorsed the idea of marriage equality, and I think that is represented in the victories that we saw on Tuesday.
Now, immediately, the president's going to have a reshuffle of his cabinet. We have Treasury Secretary Tim Geithner is going to be leaving soon, and so will Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. What do you see in your crystal ball, political crystal ball there?
Well, I think there are a number of people in the Democratic Party who are obviously now putting themselves in the position to assume one of these cabinet positions. Susan Rice has been mentioned as a potential cabinet member. John Kerry has been mentioned as a potential cabinet member. There are a number of Democrats who I think are lining up, trying very hard to see what are the appropriate positions for them. And I think that you will see a significant shift in the cabinet. Hillary is gone. She's made that clear. Now the question is what happens at state. That's going to be the most important of the positions that remains empty.
I think John Kerry would be a tremendous choice for Secretary of State. I think Susan Rice is going to have a lot of problems getting confirmed as Secretary of State. It's going to bring up the whole Benghazi thing. I think the administration would take a pass on that and move to a safe choice like Senator Kerry.
Bernard Whitman and Herb London, thank you for your insight.
Thanks so much.
Now let's start talking about the next election, the mayoral election. Next year, we'll have you back for that one.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
You.
And that'll do it for our program for this week.